Hey, what's going on, guys? Today we are going to be going over the much talked about VSX headphones by Steven Slate Audio. After mixing for the last 12 years of my life, I recently had the perfect opportunity to put these headphones through their paces, mixing and mastering a brand new EP. Shameless plug. In total, I think I ended up doing over 40 mixes and several different rounds of masters to finish that EP. So all in all, I've probably spent several dozen hours using the headphones and have had some time to solidify my thoughts. Also, I felt like other reviews didn't cover a really important aspect of the headphones, which is how do you integrate these into your workflow? How do you actually use them in your DAW? The most important question in my mind is not so much do these headphones sound good or bad, but rather can you integrate them into your workflow and use them to accurately analyze and improve your mix along the way? And perhaps most importantly, who is this product actually for? Who is going to benefit the most from it, and who could potentially skip it? We're going to go over all of this and more, so stay tuned. So before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about MySpace, not the website for discovering emo music, but rather my actual studio environment. Since this is a product that you have to experience in order to understand, I can't really play the audio for you because the plugin that the headphones go with will distort the audio in a way that won't make any sense unless you have the actual headphones on your head. So rather, I think it's important to lay the groundwork of this is the environment I'm working with, this is the equipment that I use, and how did I integrate it into my workflow. So this is a small studio apartment in New York City. I have pretty nice acoustic treatment from GIK Acoustics that has really helped the sound and reverberation in this room. My primary monitors are these Head Type 7 monitors that are absolutely fantastic and I love. And I also have this Behringer controller that lets me mute my audio and switch it to mono. And the mute button is super helpful because you can actually turn off your monitors completely while your headphones are still plugged in using this device. And that's an important thing to note with these headphones. If you have your monitors and your headphones going at the same time, you could potentially experience some bleed coming from the monitors that would distort your perception of what you're hearing. Basically, this pair of headphones is specially designed to work in tandem with the plugin that you'll use in your DAW or on your computer. And ultimately, the goal is for you to emulate other audio environments using these headphones along with the software. So let's start with an overview of the interface that you'll be using with these headphones. All right, so we have transported over to the DAW. Let's go ahead and take a look. So first of all, in order to use VSX, you are going to put it on your master bus. And then once you open up the plugin, you will see these 3D renderings show up on the UI that are actually pretty nice and add something to the experience of feeling like you're in a different place listening to the music. And you'll see a small selection of controls here as well. Right away up at the top here, you'll see this Browse Rooms button. This is going to give you the full selection of everything that's available to you with your VSX account. Note that I have everything available because I did end up initially starting with the Essentials edition and then ultimately moved up to the Platinum edition because it went on sale and I was really enjoying the product so far. So as you can see, as I click through some of these rooms, many of them have multiple speaker options. A lot of these are going to be near field, midfield, and far field. Some just have near and mains. Others only have a single option. This is because the spaces that they're emulating, maybe they captured multiple different monitor sources. So in NRG Studios, for example, you'll see that there's 3 sets of monitors and they provided an emulation for each of these. So as you'll see when we move through the rooms here, there's several different categories of rooms that are each useful for something different. We've got standard professional studio rooms. We've got clubs that are going to be much more bass heavy. We've got cars. We all know the infamous car test for your mix where things start to fall apart. We've got some mono sources like the cell phone and the boombox. And we've also got several headphone emulations as well as an earpod emulation. Now down here we have some EQ as well. I have not found myself reaching for this. I don't necessarily feel the need to tweak individual rooms or all of the rooms with an EQ adjustment. I'm really just looking to see on the whole what is going to feel different in each room as I move through. Additionally, there's this depth slider that is supposed to sort of exaggerate the 3D element of the sound. I don't feel that it makes a massive difference, but you can definitely hear something as you toggle it back and forth. We have an overall gain compensation, which is pretty important. For instance, if you're doing what I'm doing and switching between headphones and your studio monitors, you want to dial this in so that it matches appropriately when you go between sources. There's also a level matched bypass here, which is different than the generic bypass on the overall plugin. This one is level matched because there's quite a noticeable volume drop off when this plugin is enabled. So if you use the actual bypass and switch between the two, you will see a huge spike in volume, whereas level match bypass will not do that as long as you leave the plugin enabled. And then last but certainly not least is the Fave 5, which lets you toggle between your favorite rooms and your favorite speaker emulation from that room. Okay, so now you've had an overview of the product and what its features are. Let's talk about how we actually use this. So I think the first thing that everyone probably does when they reach for this software is going to be pull in a bunch of reference mixes or your own mixes that you're very familiar with and see what they sound like in these different spaces. And this is definitely what you should be doing. This is the best way to get initiated with the product. In doing so, one of the first things that I noticed is that okay sounding mixes ended up sounding very different between rooms. So if I toggled between sources here, I would notice jumps in certain frequency ranges, or things would just suddenly become unbalanced as I toggled through while the song was playing. Whereas if I was listening to a great mix, the overall balance would feel consistent as I swapped between places. And this sort of clued me in that that's kind of the goal. If you have a great sounding mix, it's going to translate well across all of these spaces. Now, clearly, if I take a great sounding mix and I go to some giant speakered club, the bass response is going to be a bit disproportionate, but still the balance of the song comes through and you can still hear the different elements of the song. So that's the ultimate goal. So that difference between an okay mix and a great mix as I'm switching through was pretty striking to me, and it gives you a good goal to shoot for as you're mixing. You want your mix to do that. So when I brought in my demos to start mixing this EP, everything was jumping all over the place, obviously, because nothing had been mixed. No EQ or compression had been applied to anything. But then as I went through the process, as I toggled through rooms, things started sounding balanced across the board. So once you're familiar with what some of these rooms sound like and what good mixes or great mixes sound like in these rooms, the next step in using this is pretty obvious. You just start mixing. So basically you'll just pop this on the master bus, start soloing an individual track or groups of tracks and listening to them in different spaces, noticing things like, oh, my rhythm guitar section sounds a lot brighter when I'm in Sonoma Studios versus Mike Dean's studio. And the goal is that eventually you will develop a sense of which room is good for different things. In that way, starting with the Essentials bundle might actually be helpful because you don't have as many options to choose from right off the bat. And I think that the options that are offered in the Essentials bundle are excellent and really cover all your bases, if I'm being honest. But yeah, you ultimately want to develop a sense of like, oh, this room is great for dialing in the sub of my bass, whereas this room here is great for dialing in my lead guitar tone because it has a little bit more atmosphere. And remember, with the workflow here, and I believe this is very important for those of you who actually do have studio monitors as well, you want to mix in these different rooms for a period of time and then switch back over to your monitors. You don't want to just spend the entire time only mixing in the headphones because you'll get additional ear fatigue, and I believe that your home monitors should be your sort of home base for what a mix sounds like. It's definitely okay to get lost in the VSX universe for a while, but always make sure that you're coming back and referencing things outside as well. Okay, so now that we've talked about how you might use this for mixing a little bit, let's talk about what my top 5 rooms are and what the reasoning is for each of those. So first off, we've got NRG Studios. The reason I like this one a lot is because it has a lot more vibe or atmosphere. So I think this room is a great choice for making sure your mix will translate on more exciting listening mediums like boosted headphones or speakers that have a little bit of extra excitement in them. So next up is the electric car. This is my favorite of the car varieties. As I alluded to, the infamous car mix test. Sometimes you're working on your mix, you take it out to the car, and it sounds like complete garbage, sounds like somebody else entirely mixed this song. You have no idea what's going on. Always good to have a car reference, and I do think that the emulation here does a pretty good job of that. And as I said, I do like this car emulation the most. There are also Mike Dean's car and the SUVs. I feel like these have super exaggerated low end, If the EQ on somebody's car speaker is boosted in the low end, as is common, maybe these are good choices. But the electric car in particular just sounds like a car with high quality speakers to me. Now, you'd think I'd put this at number 1 because it's my absolute favorite of all of the rooms, but it's my number 3, and that is Sonoma Studios. So this is my favorite for a few different reasons. Most importantly, this room is just super dry and transparent. There's really no extra hype in this room, so it can be very humbling, but it gives you an honest listen to the mix that you're working on, in my opinion. My only note here is that I do think there's a little extra excitement around 4 or 5K that can make rhythm guitars, for example, sound a little bit extra hypey, but overall, this is a very dry and transparent room, and I love it for that. So all in all, where my head monitors in the real world are my home base for a reality check, in VSX, this is my home base for a reality check. So I really love this one. And if I'm being honest, one day I'm planning on building out a much bigger home studio, and I would love for that room to sound very similar to this. I just absolutely love the sound of this space. So if you want to see me do a full studio build from the ground up, where I put in the drywall, windows, recording room, patch bay, everything, go ahead and subscribe. Might do that in like 5 years. So, all right, next up we've got Steven Slate's mix room. So this one is less hype than the NRG room, but I think that it serves a fairly similar purpose. It's just a nice sounding room that sounds fairly exciting, and it's also just a great alternative to wake your ears up a bit and maybe notice something in a certain frequency range that you were missing in a different room. And last but least, the cell phone. Sadly, the truth is, most of the people listening to your music are probably going to hear it for at least the first time on a crappy cell phone speaker. Unfortunately, this kills a ton of nuance in your mix, as we all know, but that is the reality of today, so we need to prepare for that. Ultimately, the goal is to, again, make sure that your mix translates across all the different room types, and that even includes a cell phone, and you want to make sure that, at least relatively speaking, your mix still sounds decent even on here. Another thing that I want to note is when I'm in other rooms, I might be making EQ adjustments as I go. Maybe I'm hearing something that I need to notch out in a certain frequency range. With this one, I'm not really making any EQ or compression moves or anything like that. It's really just a vibe check to see, is it translating when everything is getting crushed down so much? I'm not going to, change the EQ curve of my lead guitar based on what it sounds like on this cell phone. But if I hear something super egregious, I might go, check in another room and see if I can fine tune things. So if you have VSX and you have a different Fave 5, please let me know down below. Definitely curious to hear what your favorites are and why. But yeah, my overall mixing process is mostly going to be switching between these rooms, using them to see if things are translating across different rooms. Again, that's the ultimate goal. But yeah, if things are sounding good as I'm switching between these 5 rooms primarily, I have a good feeling that things are going to translate elsewhere. And just because these are my favorite 5 does not mean I don't leverage the other rooms as well. Yellow Matter Studios can be really helpful for detailed sounds. I like to use Mike Dean's studio or Zuma Studios to check on things as well. As I mentioned, I think the SUV in Mike Dean's car can still be useful if you're looking for like an exaggerated low end in a car environment. And then I also find that the pod emulation for ear pods is super helpful. There's a wired and wireless version. And again, another reality check. People are either going to be listening to stuff on a cell phone or on, AirPods or something. So it is definitely important and worthwhile to check things out on there as well. So let's go over some of my gripes with the VSX system. Steven, if you're watching this, I really want more than 5 options for my Fave 5. I want a Fave 8 or a Fave 10 even. I'd love to add the Pod, Zuma Studios, and Archon, if that's how you say it. All of those spaces are excellent, and I feel myself always wanted to go towards those, but the convenience of the Fave 5 is just fantastic. Although I reach for each of those a little bit less than my core Fave 5, I do still go to them quite often. Another gripe, which is a little bit unexpected, is I feel that all of the headphone emulations are actually some of the worst in the application. I honestly find all the headphone emulations pretty unhelpful, except for the SA pods, which I do feel emulate an earbud sensation pretty well. But all of the headphone emulations, ironically, don't actually sound like any real headphones that I've used personally. If you've used this product and you feel differently, please let me know in the comments, but to me it was just kind of a disconnect. But regardless, if your mix translates in the other spaces as you toggle through, as I've been discussing, I think your mix will translate on headphones quite well. I always did end up doing a headphone check walking around when I was working on the mixes for the EP. But yeah, if your mix is sounding good in all the other rooms, I don't think you'll have too much of an issue. So not too many gripes, but let's move on to the conclusion. Does the build feel solid? Yes, I think the build quality is pretty good on these. I wouldn't run over it with your truck though. Do they feel comfortable to wear for long periods of time? Yes. I've definitely worn them for periods of a couple hours on several different occasions, and I honestly think they're more comfortable than most headphones. Should you throw away your speakers and completely forget about soundproofing your space? No, absolutely not. I think that's still a big priority for people. It is expensive to do so, so that maybe is a step further on down the road, but I still view the home studio and my monitors as the primary source of truth, and VSX as a really helpful aid to help me get to the point I'm going a little bit easier. To me, the studio monitors are reality, and VSX is an extremely helpful emulation of different spaces to help me make sure that things are going to translate. You can't necessarily get everything from your primary source of truth, especially if you are not working in a perfect studio environment, which most of us are not, and that's where these come in. Are these headphones now part of my regular workflow? Absolutely. Now, do I recommend these? Absolutely yes. But to which individuals? First of all, if you are at a place in your music production journey where you don't have much space, you can't get more space, maybe you can't afford treatment or good monitors, these are an excellent option for you. Again, if you've been mixing for a long time and you have a decent sounding space and some good monitors, I still think these are extremely helpful for you for, as I said, filling in some of those gaps where maybe your listening environment isn't quite perfect. And honestly, if I was just starting out on mixing and I only had $200 or $300 and I was trying to choose between buying some low-end studio monitors to use in a space that sounds terrible versus buying these, I honestly would probably buy these instead. And then I would just have the goal of getting a better room setup down the road. At first I was really skeptical and thought maybe I'd get a little bit of help here or there with certain parts of my mix, but ultimately I think it's become a permanent part of my workflow where I switch between my monitors as my primary source of truth, and then I go to VSX, spend some time there, maybe 30 minutes, an hour, going between different rooms. Maybe I use it to dial in the sub-frequencies of my bass and then go back to the monitors and check things out. But yeah, it's become a permanent part of my workflow and has really helped my mixes, I think. But you should also go check out my latest EP and see if you think it made a difference. So that's all I've got for you guys today. If you have any additional comments or questions, please feel free to let me know. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Really appreciate it, and have a good one.